Howdy, y'all. So Primarchs are the awesome demigod children of the Emperor of Mankind himself. Really, they're clones, but they're really tall and strong, and I wouldn't use that word around them. Some are so powerful that they can turn invisible or affect the willpower and minds of others. Some are gods on the battlefield and are warlords that are so potent that they subjugated entire planets by the time they even realized who and what they were. But some of them are just trash. They could never compete with their greater brothers, and really either just made so many mistakes or just never did anything to make themselves great. And hey, I love these lists about what sucks. You generally don't come to me for why something is good. Why don't I have any friends? So, which are the 5 crappiest Primarchs? I'm Trevor, this is Battle Brothers TV. Let's get it. First off, I just want to say this list is talking about the Primarchs as they were during the era of Primarchs, from the time of their scattering amongst the stars by the Chaos douchebag up until the end of the Great Crusade and the beginning of the Horus Heresy. That's the era I'm looking at. Clearly, we know that 2 of the Primarchs were in fact so rubbish that they were victims of cancel culture before we ever got to meet them. I'm not talking about those losers. Generally, when I talk about which ones are great and which ones are crappy during this era, I'm talking about the ones that contributed most and the least to the Emperor's major plans and goals. You know, the reason they were made. Number 5, Magnus the Red. Nope, I don't want to hear it. Shh. This is my video. You have to hear me out. You're on that side of the screen. I know Magnus is incredibly powerful and is just huge, but he's also one of the hugest screw-ups of all of the Primarchs. His powers are great, sure. He's one of the most intelligent and has the most powerful psyker abilities in the known galaxy. He's often depicted as the largest Primarch, or at least a very close second to Vulcan. Hey, size matters. But he just doesn't do anything particularly useful. During the Great Crusade, all he does is get distracted super easily by trying to be a psychic college librarian and putting together an enormous library of esoteric knowledge. Seemingly, he also has to spend way too much time watching after his sweet little warp time bomb children. Beating his brats into submission took him so long, he wasn't even able to join the Great Crusade until a full 100 years after it began. Better late than never? Perhaps he would have been more useful to his father's crusade if he hadn't spent so much time fighting with his siblings. Here's looking at you, mangy wolf boy. Oh yeah, and he was in trouble all the time for thinking he was the psychic titties and literally f***ing up the entire crusade. First, the war effort has to completely stop so that he can be judged at the Council of Nicaea. Then he literally causes the Horus Heresy to become a galaxy-wide rebellion when he comes through the Eldar webway to inform Big Imps that Horus is a chaos-loving dick. He accidentally blows up the work on the webway that Big Imps had been engaged in, and keeps said imps from going forth and laying the smackdown on his heretical offspring. So ultimately, in his hubris, he uses sorcery, exactly what Daddy just told him not to do. He tries to tell Big Imps something that the Master of Mankind already knew, destroys the major work of Big Imps, and lets the galaxy catch fire. He's awesome, kids. Number 4. Perturabo, the Primarch of the Iron Warriors. Obviously, his name was taken from the word perturbed, which means feeling or showing great concern or mental or emotional upset, or greatly disordered or deranged. I think this pretty much sets the stage for old Purdy, or old Metal Dreads, as I like to call him. So now we have a demigod with PTSD, clinical depression and anxiety, and a massive inferiority complex. Not saying that these things are bad or wrong in any way, just saying if you're going to devote all this time to some sort of genetic stew to make super soldiers and great commanders, maybe leave those parts out from now on. I mean, am I wrong? Sure, Purdy is a super smart guy who's techie, mathematically inclined, with some bangin' ass logic skills, but his disorders largely make him maniacal. Great thinking and planning skills don't amount to balls if your idea of cold logic is literally killing off 1 in 10 of your own gene children. Of around 35,000 original Iron Warriors, he had 3,500 executed because they weren't the best legion in the galaxy. Look to thine own ass there. First, Purdy, you're pretty much the poster child for why IQ doesn't necessarily mean shit. And those powers. Woo, boy! I can always see the Eye of Terror. That's gonna be real good for my psyche. Thanks, Dad. Why can't it be the Eye of Puppies and Hugs? His genius with machinery and gadgets did get Mars on board with the Emperor's great plans, but that's really just not enough. Even with his Logos computer attached to his head, feeding him data, telemetry, keeping him in touch with every facet of a battlefield, he still couldn't find ways to improve his legion's standing, thereby figuring out how to not execute and bitch out every one of his gene children. Inevitably, the brutal tactics that he used on his own kids crushed morale, and even caused him to be censured by Horus. Oh, and no other Primarchs really liked him either, except for Magnus, just a bit, but I mean, it's Magnus, who cares? 3. Angron, the Red Angel, Primarch of the World Eaters. This guy is trash with 2 syllables. Let's be clear, this is the only demigod warlord who couldn't conquer his own planet of Nuceria. Until he has the Butcher's nails, those fat hair implants, shoved into his brain, he had a pretty cool power of total empathy towards others and calming their emotions. How very zen-like for the future Red Hulk. The Butcher's nails made him desire to kill and boosted his serotonin levels when he slaughtered in combat. Happy brain juice. However, as discovered by the big imps, they also made him insane. No shit. This was ultimately his downfall. Sure, he was tough and was a great battle rager warrior. Only in the top 25th percentile of great Primarch warriors, though. But the Hulk isn't exactly the most effective member of the Avengers, and Angron was basically useless. You think them hair plugs was worth it? His slight attitude problem led him to completely decimate every enemy with impunity in massive bloodbaths. Now, bloodbaths don't do too much for diplomacy. Plus, it's hard to effectively rule over a bunch of skeletons. He also killed 10% of his sons before then abandoning them to go on a bender throughout the galaxy living like a wild animal. Imperial Social Services is gonna be pissed. Ultimately, Angron is tough as butcher's nails. You see what I did there? But a totally useless roid rager. Number 2, Lorgar, the Preacher, the Primarch of the Word Bearers. No one really likes Lorgar because, let's face it, he was a little weird. Aside from being the Primarch most likely to eat glue, he had great wisdom and was a minor psyker who could speak directly to the hearts of men and influence them. He believed that the Imperium would find truth through worship and faith. You know, the exact opposite of what his daddy sent him out into the galaxy to preach to begin with. Off to a stellar start, Lorgar! So Lorgar was a terrible warrior, the weakest in fact until he was tainted by the warp. He wasn't an effective crusader either because he kept stopping to build churches. No one liked him, not even his brothers. His father even thought he was a bit too strange and extreme. After his dad be all like, "Are you a god?" No. Lorgar wrote a holy scripture about him and called it the Lectitio Divinitatis. He doesn't seem to get the point, that lad. So his dad had to spank him. "Son, you better run up there in the woods and get me a switch, and you be back before dark. I'm gonna whoop that." So basically, he had nearly limitless wisdom, which can be defined as good judgment and decision-making, and yet defied the Imperial truth and his father's/creator's will. Yeah. Good decision-making. Oh yeah, and then there's the whole falling to chaos and literally causing the whole Horus Heresy thing. Number 1, Roboute Guilliman. The Primarch of the Ultramarines is just garbage. Whoa, just kidding. I know. Heresy. Everybody stop. Take a deep breath. Please don't send hate mail, all you blue poster boys. But let's be honest, this is my honorable mention. Not necessarily a 6th place, but I think he does belong in the bottom half of the list. Though I know all the neckbeards in the galaxy are currently seething with misplaced testosterone-driven fury right now. Roboute Guilliman can be a beast in combat, especially when ejected into space and forced to tear apart world bearers with his sweet little daddy's boy handsies. But in general, even by self-admission in his own Primarch novel, he is one of the weaker Primarchs martially. I mean, GW gave him to us as a playable model because even having him stalk around the battlefield just won't tip the scales too much. I understand that he's a great leader and practically had his own empire by the time the Big Imps even found him, but that's because his superpower is organization. I mean, how useful is a great leader who lives in a galaxy already ruled by a greater leader anyway? An organization? Wow, we have a superpowered secretary on our hands. It's administrative assistant. Sorry? Oh, did you get the memo about those TPS reports? Oh yeah, Dad. I did my TPS reports and then did Angron's and Vulcan's and Lehman's because he can't write. Yeah, if you could go ahead and do them for all the others, that'd be great. Overall, he's less smart than Perturabo, less of a leader than Horus, less charismatic than Sanguinius, less of a badass than the Lion, and less of a strategist than Dorn. He deserves higher than 6th place, but he is just average. The patron saint of C students. Number 1, Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the Iron Hands. This one should not be a surprise and should be obvious because Ferrus Manus just didn't do much. Well, he was written wrong. Well, he didn't have enough lore, I hear you say. They write great deeds about great men. If there are no deeds at all written about such a popular guy that was in the center of attention during a galactic war like Ferrus Manus, chances are he was not a great man. Lack of lore aside, his best thing is that he's a good tactician, according to Horus, a known liar and social engineer. He has lame-ass metal arms, and he can build awesome things, just not as awesome as Vulcan or Purdy. So literally, of the 3 renowned smiths and builders, he's dead last. If you ain't first, you're last. When your greatest known tactic is to wipe out entire populations simply because you weren't a good enough warrior or diplomat to subjugate them, the neighbors is gonna talk. And I don't even want to hear that he's the greatest warrior or some nonsense like that. He couldn't even destroy the Diasporex without help from Fulgrim's Ninos. And his stature as a great warrior is not mentioned anywhere in the lore. But he does buy the Isvanian dust farm before any of the other Primarchs, and is killed by Fulgrim the Fabulous! I don't care if Fulgrim had a cursed blade and was tainted by the warp at the time. You just don't die to a dude who wears that much purple on purpose. So, my next point, subscribe! If you like this content, please do subscribe to the channel. Tell me in the comments who you think the worst 5 Primarchs of all time were. And I swear to God, if I see one comment about Rowboat's Gorillaman, I'm going to crawl through the comments section at you like that girl from The Ring. If you liked the video today, please give me a big old thumbs up. Make sure that you blast the bell icon for more notifications. I'm Trevor, this is Battle Brothers TV, and we'll see you on the battlefield.